Hello, I don't know any Finnish, so this is all going to be in English. I know a little bit of Finnish. I know hey, moi, moi moi, kiitos, and the one that they said is all I need to know, kiitos.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
Smart.
So you know less than most of the foreigners here, but like more words from different sections than hey. Just they know all the swear words. You don't know any of them according.
Oh, I know one swear word. Yeah.
Can
That's another story. Yeah. If I drink some beers, I'll tell you that story. Actually, it's funny that you say moi moi to say goodbye, because someone said moi moi to me. I thought they meant hello twice, and then they walked away, and it was really weird. They were like moi moi, and turned around. I was like, oh, okay. I had to Google moi moi. Cool. So I'm going to do hands-on with Unity 5. So I actually really don't like PowerPoint at all. So I'll do most of this in Editor, building Steam from scratch, sort of showing all sort of new workflows, new funky bits and pieces in Unity. Things like gotchas to look out for, some features that will make grown men cry, things like that. Is everyone okay with that? Beautiful. You're very happy. Is this Finland? Yeah. Cool. It's because there's sauna promised later, right?
Yeah.
Beer. A sauna and beer. Happy Joe? Probably, yeah. Okay, so just so I get an idea of the people in the room, put your hand up if you wrote code. Or copy-paste from online, or, okay, there's everyone's. Put your hand up if you were an artist, so 3D artist. Beautiful. What about 2D artist? Okay, audio? Sound? Okay. Are you in a band, by the way?
Not at the moment.
Like I have a thing where there will always be someone with a beard who does audio who's in a band. It seems to be, and they either play guitar, bass, or drums. Like never the singer. Yeah.
Well, I don't play drums, but I can play guitar, bass, and I can sing.
Well, that'll do. At the same time, hopefully. Anyone here do Q&A? Technically, everyone should put their hands up. So yeah. Okay. Anyone here who uses Unity? Okay, cool. Who here doesn't even make games? They just saw, oh, it might be quite cool to come in here. That's what we saw now later.
It's great to be an organizer.
Put your hand up if you're not from Finland. Oh, okay. Moi? Sweet. Okay, so I'll carry on. So, yeah, hands on Unity 5. So, here is embarrassing baby photo. This is me. I actually said to my mum, can I cosplay as... No, I didn't say cosplay. I said, can I be Mario? So that's me cosplaying at a young age. I actually showed that photo to someone from Intel, and they said they still program on that keyboard, so by that you can guess my age. So I'm a Unity evangelist. My family thinks I do Tom Cruise's job, which is being a Scientologist and jump out of buildings and things. But it's actually kind of the complete opposite of being badass, like Tom Cruise. So like I look after Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I travel around. I go visit companies. I come to events like this. I go to conferences. Basically, present all the new things in Unity, old things, existing things, showing a lot of workflows. And basically sit down with people and talk about their games, any issues they have, and sort of give them an idea of what Unity is in the future. And I presented like in a gym, like in an elevator, at a bar, to a dog. Yeah, basically everywhere. Someone actually said, "Can I bring my dog to your talk?" Yeah, it was amazing. They just sat like in front of me. It was so cool. If you're making a great game, or you're thinking of designing one, or you're in the process of building one, or you've shipped one already, or sort of any place in the spectrum, I like playing games as well as making them. So like, please contact me. Say, "Oh, here is my game. It's released on iOS," or "Here's my game. I'm not quite sure, sort of, like which feature. Is there a feature coming out that may be able to help me here? Or I'm thinking of putting this together. Do you have any like tutorials that you can send me and things? Just contact me. So I'm on Twitter and I just upload a photo of a badger, so it's not really like a corporate Twitter. I have an email, but actually Twitter's easier to get hold of. Everyone sort of decides to do that instead. So Unity, we kind of have these two big wishy-washy kind of like goals. So democratize game development. And that's kind of a really sort of big, like I guess, evangelist-y, Scientologist-y kind of like goal. And that's to kind of make tools that people can make whatever they want, for ranging from sort of like niche little 2D pixel art games to big epic 3D games that are amazing for Oculus, for basically every platform. That's kind of our goal. So you kind of build your game and build it to all these different platforms. And then sort of our new goal, which we're focusing on more, is to help developers to create, connect, and succeed. And that's through kind of 3 sort of key areas. It's one to create like an engine, so like tools so you can make great content. Another one to connect them with everyone after you ship your game. Because a lot of people are saying, yeah, Unity's pretty cool because you can make all these games and things, but after you ship it, like there's actually nothing like out of the box to actually help us. Like, how do we know our game's crashing on the tutorial for these specific Android users? How do we know people even like our game? Why is no one talking about my game and things like that? Or I want to test my game more on these platforms. So we've actually started working on all these things so you can actually kind of maintain your game after you release it, because it's very rare you find a developer who will release a game and then never ever update it ever again. I was talking to a guy from Sega, and he said on Sonic Dash, he worked on it for a year, then he released it, then he worked on it for 2 years after that. So he worked twice the amount of time after the game was released than actually before it was released. And he said that's completely insane. But, oh well, that's how it is, I guess. Sweet. So we now make a whole bunch of stuff. So we make the game engine, and now we make all these extra things like cloud build and analytics and ads and every play, kind of have to help you after you release your game. So I'm going to talk about the other stuff later. I'm going to talk about the engine first. So yeah, create. So we released recently Unity 5, which is basically like another big step in Unity. So with like Unity 3 to 4 to 5, 5 is kind of like the one where we sort of went wild and sort of updated just about every area of the engine, which was very interesting and yields very cool results. So I'm going to go through sort of a lot of the editor bits and pieces and sort of show all the areas that pieces together. So we sort of worked on a lot of areas. We worked on a lot of like visual areas, so a lot of like how assets are represented in Unity in 3D. We worked also a lot on like the physics and optimizations. We also worked on like audio. We worked on a whole range of different bits and pieces. So I'm going to demo loads of it because I really don't like PowerPoint. So here we have so put your hand out if you actually use Unity 5 or have tried it. Ah, okay. So a lot of you can just come over and do the rest of this talk, right? No. Okay, if it was on a sauna, you would all be nodding, but okay. So I'm going to go through and build up a very simple scene from scratch, sort of adding all the different things, pointing out lighting, pointing out workflows and things, and we'll have a character running around in a beautiful environment in, I guess, 40 minutes or so. So I'm actually going to use assets from a game that was released. So Republic Remastered. Oh, thanks for the Wi-Fi, by the way. But I don't know what Pico Keiko Conan means.
It's a long story.
There's a multiple.
That's fine.
It's like
Kids show.
Oh, okay.
you can also use it for a lot of other words. Like
I won't ask what the other words are. Yeah.
I'll tell you in the song.
And then, yeah, that seems to be the typical Finnish response.
Not optional.
So, this game called Republic, has anyone played this game? So it was released on iPad, and then basically they've re-released it on PC. And basically Republic is made by a company called Camouflage, and actually the Camouflage offices are in our Seattle office, so you just have people sort of walking in and out, it's pretty cool. And basically, we worked with them. They basically took several scenes from their game, and then they basically gave it to us to distribute and show to people, like, this is how a game is set up with lighting and reflections and beautifulness and things like that. So people can take it apart and see how it's analyzed. So it's actual assets from the game. So I'm going to use everything that you can just go download straight away, and I'll show you where that link is. So I've got this scene here, and I'll build it from scratch. So the first thing to look at in Unity 5 is the lighting has been completely rewritten. And you have this kind of new lighting panel, which basically looks kind of intimidating. There's lots of sliders, buttons, stuff that makes sense, stuff that probably doesn't make sense. And you've got to think about lighting a bit more. Previously in Unity 4, it was very kind of harsh lighting, like you'd have a light come down here and it didn't look nice. You didn't have it bouncing off of surfaces. It was really difficult to get lighting to look really nice in Unity 4 unless you did like a cel-shaded game or like a 2D game or anything that didn't use any funky lighting. So we basically redid this from scratch. So what you'll notice is we have a big sky pixel background, we've got a simple directional light like so, and we've got the panel here. So if I go in and I bring in my character, so I've got this little dude here. Now he's not actually from the public game, he's just some random sci-fi dude that I use. So if we bring in this character is using the new sort of base shader that comes from Unity called the standard shader. I'm on a kind of a bit of a vendetta because it used to be called the Uber shader, which is like a kick-ass name for a shader. And then it's universal shader, now it's standard shader, so it's like, well, hey, this is cool. And then like, okay, now it's like, so I was going to change the source code before it got released, but then I'd probably have 300 programs get really angry at me, and one program angry at me is enough. So when you bring in an asset into Unity 5, it basically default uses kind of like the skybox or the environment around it. So if I turn off my lights, what you can notice is that without any lighting in the scene, we already have kind of these highlights from the skybox. So we've kind of got an orangey tint around here, sort of darker tints around the base. You can kind of see on this white object, you have all this nice ambient lighting. And if we change the skybox, you can also change that lighting. So I've got a cube map with a sort of stormy days thing in the corner. So if I just bring that in, you can see that the lighting updates, and you can see the character now has all the tones. This isn't just this character. If I have let's just these characters. Okay, so if I have lots of objects in the scene, they all use the same sort of lighting. So it's kind of a way, I've seen probably thousands and thousands of Unity projects. In Unity 4, you have red sky, yellow lights, blue grass, and nothing really sort of gels together, and because it's all kind of harsh. Whereas all the lighting in this now is kind of all it all fades in together and blends, and it looks quite nice. If I drop in a different one, so we've got this kind of skybox, still see it seems at the bottom. It's going to swap out for the bluey, purpley hues. I've got a get up max. I got this sunny cell shaded box. So I've got the cell shaded box. You can see it's all kind of puffy. So what you can actually use is you can use the skybox for just lighting all the different elements of the scene. And you can actually blend these. So if you have a skybox of daylight, and then you fade that skybox over to a different one, everything in the scene will change because you can basically you're able to just update in the ambient lighting. If I drop in this cartoony sunset, we get a visual. It pops in. So yeah, everything now has this weird orangey, reddy lights. And I prefer the sunny one. Yeah, that's what we're happy. So you can either use this too if you're doing an outdoor scene, putting a skybox and everything kind of has the same tones. Or you can use this to actually, if you're doing a top-down kind of game where you don't see the skybox, you can use this kind of to color tone your game. So you can add it I need it to be kind of patchy yellow here and stuff. So you can almost paint into the cube map and then basically highlight sort of areas of your game without actually seeing the skybox. So you can use it in both ways. Now, most people, I'm sweeping generalization, most people kind of make indoor games, so I'm going to use sort of some indoor areas and sort of show you how that works. So let's leave this dude here. Let's give him a different name. What should we call him? What's his typical Finnish name? Jukka? Or Jussi? Mika. Okay, cool. So let's leave Mika there. So I've got here a atrium, so some assets from the game, and I'm just going to drop them into the scene. Where are they? Okay, cool. So I've got here the atrium from Republic, so one that you walk around. So dropping that into the scene looks, at face value, I showed this to some kids, and wow, it's all blue and highlighted. But to me, this doesn't look correct in any way. And I'm sort of using this workflow to show kind of when you bring in an asset, kind of how you then make it look sort of nice. So when you drop it in, several things are happening. So everything in this scene is actually just using the skybox lighting. It's all blue, which is fine if I want it to look like it's in the clouds. But if I wanted to actually not use the skybox lighting at all, it's really, really simple. I just can either delete the skybox, or I can actually just tone down the ambient intensity. So you have this slider to basically say how much impact the skybox has. So I'm just going to turn that down to 0. So because I've turned this down to 0, you notice that it's got kind of there's no lighting in the scene, but everything is being really reflective. And that's because we can define the skybox by default as a reflection source, a reflection source of skybox. So I can just basically turn down the reflection intensity down to 0, and then everything in my scene is completely shut off. So it's basically taking my big scene of all this light down to 0. But I'm going to turn that up for just a second. So currently we have this environment, and all the lighting is really, really harsh and linear, because it's all coming down and it's not really bouncing, it's not really looking properly. So what we want to do is we want to enable the GI in Unity. So the global illumination allows you to not have so many lights. There's an issue in Unity 4, but it's not an issue, but the workflow is you have to have a billion lights for it to look half decent. So you have to light all these sort of patches because you didn't have lights bouncing off of different surfaces. Whereas in Unity 5, we now have global illumination from Geomerix, who they license that to Battlefield and Mirror's Edge and games like that. So you've integrated that for free, So then you can now have like a light and that bounces off down corridors, and you can have lights bouncing and doing all sorts of really cool stuff. So I'm going to do that now. This is really, really easy to do. Just go to any objects that you want to sort of have GI enabled and make them light map static. So I'm going to select the whole atrium and I'm going to make it light map static. It's going to say yes. So what's going to happen is it's actually just going to bake it in the background. So this is now with Unity. Let me just change some values. Okay, hi. Actually, I've never ever clicked unlimited, and I'm really scared by having an option of unlimited in any software ever, because I don't really want my Mac to set on fire, so I've never clicked it. I said that once, and someone in talk just goes, YOLO, just do it. I think it was in Manchester, so yeah. Okay. So an issue in Unity 4 was that like you could bake, and you could only have baked lighting, and then it would just take like ages. So I'd kick off a bake, and then I'd go away and just watch Breaking Bad, and then come back an hour later and see what it looks like. So I spent more time watching Walter White create like a meth empire than making my game, which is kind of weird to be a game developer and do that. So what we decided to do is whenever you bake lighting, both real-time GI lighting and baked lights, it now does it in the background, so you can still do stuff in the editor. I can still go to the editor, you can go to Mika, I can like move them around and stuff, and do all sorts of funky things. Because it's baking in the background, it doesn't have a big loading file. So whilst it's baking, I can go in, set up cameras, do some UI, write some code, attach some stuff, test it and things like that. You can even just click play in the editor and test out your game whilst it's baking in the background. It will just pause it and then resume it. So it's a much nicer workflow than like placing a box and then like having to click bake for like an hour and then coming back and then placing another box and clicking. You can now just add to it very slowly. So because this is baking every single item in the scene, I think this environment takes like 4 minutes or so. But because I'm allowed to now do other things in the environment, I'm going to go do that. So that will bake in the background. And it goes through lots of various phases. So yeah. Cool. So we can specify things such as the real-time GI, baked GI, and lots of other options as well. Now, what the difference between real-time GI and baked GI is baked GI will just take all the lights, bake what their impression is onto the surface, and just leave it like that. So, like classic light mapping. What the real-time GI does is it doesn't affect the lights at all. It affects the geometry. So, the one workflow we did before was like you bake the lights and then you move objects around, but then you had to like kind of update what the lights look like. Now what you do is you actually bake all the data into the geometry, and that way you can then have lights dangling, swinging around, and the geometry already knows how the lights are going to bounce off of it and do all sorts of stuff. Because we asked like loads of artists, and they said, oh, we want to like set up the scene, and then we want to just go crazy with lights and dim them, make them brighter. You know, it's annoying to have a light like an intensity of 1.5, you want it 1.6, and you have to rebake everything. Or I want my light to be slightly pinker, because everyone wants pink lighting. And then basically, yeah, tweak that. So now you bake the geometry, and then you can go crazy with lights, have a flashlight running around and stuff, and it's already works out how the lighting's going to interact with everything. Cool, so whilst it's doing that, I'm going to go to Mika. So here we have Mika. So Mika looks kind of bland, so he's kind of minimalistic, so let's actually add some bits and pieces to it. So if I select Mika, we now have a new, so as well as sort of the GI element baking the background, we now have a new standard shader, which is the one that I said was like Uber shader, then universal shader, and now standard shader. And this shader is like a PBR-enabled shader, so you can do physically based rendering, or both metallic workflow and specular workflow on like every object in Unity. And you don't have to have the right textures to do this. You can just have the sliders, because the workflow they went with was like the Pixar workflow, where everything has an element of smoothness. So, for example, if you look at like the cushions on the chairs, like that's not very smooth. Whereas, for example, if you look at like the plastic on the roof, that's quite smooth. So, because that's smoother, I can see reflections of people in that. So, basically, everything with this like PBR shader. Oh, the light mapping is finished as well. Cool. Because everything on this PBR shader has a smoothness slider, you can basically chuck this onto any object and say, this needs to be a table, so I need to make it a bit smoother so it bounces, it's reflective, it bounces light. Or I want this to be a leather, and I don't want this to bounce light, so I'll set the smoothness down. Now, we have here two standard shaders. Standard, which is the metallic one, so we define how metallic an object is, so I can basically say, like, Evan is way more metallic, and he's kind of got sort of metallic-y, sort of chromy view. But Evan can be really metallic, but not sort of smooth at all. So he's now really metallic but not smooth. So let's say like rust, for example. I can then say actually be metallic and very smooth. So it's kind of like all chromy and things like that. You can kind of see it reflecting all the skybox. When we put in like reflection, like probes, it'll look even better. And as well as having sort of like metallic workflow, we can also do the standard specular workflow. So that just gives you a smoothness slider, and you can define what the smoothness is. So let's say, for example, I want him to be like red and chromy, or I can actually turn him into a mirror by setting his specular to be white, and he's now kind of like a mirror of like environment around him and stuff. It's kind of creepy. Okay, but we don't want him to look. We don't want Mika to look like that. We want him to look kind of normal. So what we have here is Mika's objects. There's materials, and the way that the sort of the PBR workflow goes is you assign in the different slots what sort of contents you want. So we have a slot for albedo, which is just the texture. So of what his colors are like. So if I find albedo, which is here, you can see that this texture is basically just highlighting all the colors in sort of detail. So he's got like a little 101 sign up here. I think he has a Unity logo here as well, just corporate branding or whatever. And basically that texture doesn't have any like lighting in it, or it doesn't have any shadows. You basically separate all these items because you actually let Unity's GI do most of the lighting. You can, of course, put in your own lighting and highlights, but we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to drop this in, and he should now... Oh, actually, wrong one. Yeah, he comes with 4 skins. He's kind of like a Barbie. Okay, let's give it that one. So he's now just got his texture in. We can still define, how smooth and metallic he is. So if I make him really metallic, that's just with one texture. He's like really metallic and has kind of like these highlights around here. And he'll sort of reflect things in the environment. We want to do a bit more with him. So let's select him, and we can add something else. So we also have a normal map. So I can drop in a normal map straight onto him, like so. Well, okay. This. Okay, and let's turn down his metallicness. So he now has like a little rough normal map. It should be, yeah. So he's now got a little rough normal map to like highlight sort of some areas around sort of his body. As well as doing that, we also have a metallic map. So if I... Oh no, crap. Okay. He also has a metallic map. Yeah, let me fix that. You do it in your bedroom in your pants and it works perfectly. You do it in front of people, it all goes wrong. So he now has his standard normal map, which I can increase sort of like the intensity of his normals, so I can make him sort of like healed or something like that. And he also now has a metallic map, which is basically uses the red channel to define kind of areas that are more reflective than other areas. So like for example, his rib cage is quite reflective now, so if I go to his rib cage, it looks quite reflective of the environment, whereas his sort of like blue areas isn't as much. We also have a couple of other bits and pieces. So we can add an inclusion map, so we can add that in there. And that's just basically a map which defines sort of like some darker areas. If you don't want to have all these shadows being calculated on runtime because it's really expensive, you can actually add in sort of a bit of extra detail. And the last map, which is my favorite one, is the emission map. So the emission map, we can either give him like a whole color. So someone give me a color, any color.
Pink.
Not white or black.
Pink.
Pink. It's always pink. Like, every time I say someone give me a colour, someone always says pink.
You brainwash people by saying before at the presentation pink.
That's not intentional. I don't know what it is. Like, I think the first time I ever gave a presentation in Finland, there was a guy at the back with like muscles and like a mohawk, and he was like, pink, choose pink. I was like, okay. I assume
All the other colours are so boring. It's just like the exciting one.
Yeah, like, yeah, let's do it. So what we can do is we can either apply an emission to like the whole object, and you can sort of increase that, so we can like blast them out as pink, or sort of like drop them down. So he's basically emitting pink onto everything. But instead of doing that, we can actually highlight something like certain areas. So currently here we just have a texture with some areas as white, so that I can change the color. We could drop that in to basically say the white areas are glowing, and the black areas are not so glowing. The technical term, not so glowing. So I can drop that in. So what he now has, basically his eyes will be pink, his arms will be pink, and then what we can also do is we can define sort of his pinkness, so it will sort of bleed through his arm. Let's turn that down. So he now is a pink robot warrior called Mika. And when you woke up, you didn't think you'd be seeing that, right? Cool. So Mika, the pink robot warrior, who has all these textures, reflections, and little Unity logo there. Cool. Should be a Sona logo instead. Now let's save that. Mika's, just in case. So you never know what will happen. So if I now go back to my atrium, which is over here. Zoom in. So what should happen now is I can go to my lighting, tone down reflection intensity. And basically, this is now all being sort of like GI bounced. Because what I can do is I can turn down my skybox. So you notice that with my skybox, beforehand it was affecting everything, now it's not. However, if I look out here and sort of turn on my directional light, the directional light is basically coming through the roof, through that like chandelier. And you can kind of see it sort of in that sort of highlight there. But what I don't want to do is use a directional light, because directional lights are kind of boring. So let's turn that off and let's use point light instead. So I'm going to go to lights point light. I'm going to drop it in the middle of the environment, because of course it doesn't have it exactly where I need it. Go on Unity. And now we have a point light in the middle of the environment. So what I can now do is I can turn on shadows, I can increase the range, and then basically I increase the intensity up. So I basically have this environment with this one point light. Now we have like a new slider, and that's bounce intensity. So this is basically how much the light bounces. So a candle's not really going to bounce as much, whereas a torch will. So if I shine a torch on, say, like that reflective surface, it's going to bounce. The torch is going to bounce off, whereas a candle isn't really as much. And it's kind of up to you how you sort of define that. Now this warning here is only to say that if I bounce a light off of a surface, it doesn't create a shadow, because that's not really supported with point lights and spotlights, but everyone's like, well, we can just trick it and fake it, and it's not as important. But you can do that with directional lights. So I can actually increase the bounce intensity and sort of tone down the intensity. So with this one light, we can actually go into this corridor, and then round the back here, you can kind of see, like even in this corner here, we've even got a little bit of light, even though the point light is in the middle of the environment. Now it is kind of hard to see sort of how this one light is affecting everything. So what our developers did is in the scene view, if you go up to this top drop-down list, you've got shaded wireframe. We now also have sort of the global illumination charts. So we can view all the UV charts in the scene. So this basically shows you sort of like how all the UV textures are sort of mapped. Now typically if it's white and grey, it's fine. If it's sort of green, it kind of means that like it's stretched. You can see here like there's some kind of horrible stretching. There's something sort of weird with these pink areas here. So you can kind of look at this and see how the UV charting is fine. And generally if it's more like square-like or kind of like that, it's good. Whereas that's kind of more stretched. That was an unintentional thing for them to leave in, so thank you, Camouflage. We also use the systems. So what systems do is they basically group together kind of like whole chunks or sections, so sections of objects. And chunking them together, basically you don't want so many in the scene. You want to have like the whole object is one. And basically this depends on the UVs as well. Now the more interesting one is the albedo. So we can actually view, ignore that Z fighting. So we can actually view the environment without any lighting, any reflections, like no ambient lighting. Basically it's going to show the rough sort of colours in the environment. So this is actually kind of creepy, I'll be honest. I'll make a horror game with him. But you can see like the whole statue is typically grey, so he's all grey. So you can see if there's any sort of like dodgy areas that shouldn't have any colours and things like that. Now the more interesting one is emissive. Now we have nothing emitting in here. If I go to Mika, which is, where is Mika? It's probably in the sun. Okay, his emissives don't show because he's a skin mesh renderer currently. Hang on, there we go, we will have an emissive sort of like surface in here. Oh, the roof is emissive. Yeah, forgot about that. So that's emissive. Now, irradiance is actually the interesting one because irradiance shows how the lighting affects the environment and how it bounces off of the surfaces. So you can see here around the green shrubbery, there's lots of bounces. And there's lots of bounces from the light, that central light in the middle. There's lots of bounces basically coming down here, bouncing off the, sort of off this wall. We can see here with this green sort of like area in the bottom. Now, for a pop quiz, do we have any gifts to give away, by the way? Nick? We have some sweatbands, programmer sweatbands. Pink programmer sweatbands. we know our target audience well.
Also, business contract as well.
And business cards as gifts, yeah. Like, he'll just give them out anyway, regardless. So. No. So can anyone guess why these areas on the walls are kind of like green, or around here it's kind of green?
It's because of plants.
Yes, but what's causing it to bounce, do you reckon?
Text.
Yeah, so you know I was saying like the smoothness? The smoother it is, the more it will bounce off the surface. So for example, if I take my light and then I like ramp up my light so it's kind of like, it gets turned down. So what it's doing is it's basically coming onto this floor, which is like a high smoothness, and it's basically then bouncing off of it, because it's taking into account all these sort of areas. So for example, inside here, inside the plants, it's actually kind of dark, because plants aren't really reflective, so they're not really bouncing around light as much sort of like behind here. Whereas on the floor down here, because that big floor is, if I switch back to here, because that big floor is like highly specular and highly smooth, you can even see kind of like the light sort of in there. No reflections yet. It's basically then bouncing off of everything. So that's kind of why. You can also see, if I turn down this lighting a little bit, you can also see like from that point light in the middle of the environment, if I go down these corridors, it kind of gets a bit darker. And that's purely because the light is coming in and bouncing all of the environment. And I can increase this by increasing the bounce intensity of it all bouncing around. Or I can sort of tone down the intensity and then I can play around that. So yeah, so you can basically kind of see that the light from that one light is going in, it's bouncing into all the terrain, it's coming to here, it's bouncing off these surfaces, but it's kind of a bit darker down in this sort of like corridor because it's not directly being influenced by the light. So previously in Unity 4, you had to add like a billion lights to everything, you had to add lights here, 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 for it to look kind of alright, whereas now you can sort of get away with sort of like not as many lights as possible because of all the bounce lighting and things like that. Oh, you also have directionality, which looks pretty cool. That basically shows kind of like the trends in like the UV maps between one another. Awesome. Right, what else should we show? Should we actually move Mika into this place? Crazy. Okay, cool. And of course, because it's Unity, it doesn't set it where you want it to be. Cool, so, and then groovy. So we now have Mika inside this environment, just like so. Now, the downside of this environment is it's still reflecting, well, Mika's still reflecting the skybox, which is kind of really bad. Oh, I'll show you one more thing. So we have here this shadow behind the curtain, and the bounce intensity, if I whack it down to 0, it's basically now completely black, which is not very good. And if I look into the irradiance, you can see that there's not so much. Well, there isn't any irradiance behind it, whereas if I ramp up the bounce intensity, you can see that the bounces are happening sort of like behind that curtain. So rather than having everything kind of like solid faded, you can actually increase the bounce intensity and you can kind of see highlights behind the sort of curtain. Because like shadows aren't sort of truly black like that often. In environments like this, you kind of have some shadows as truly black and some shadows as faded, and this gentleman here. Oh, and he's still pink as well. So in this environment, one thing I don't really like is reflections are completely off, because there aren't any reflections at all. Currently Mika is reflecting the skybox, but if you remember, like I went to the skybox and toned it down to 0. So what we can now do in Unity is we can go to Game Objects, Lights, and add a reflection probe. And what the reflection probe allows you to do is it allows you to position it within the scene and basically create a full sort of like spherical reflection at any one point. I'm now going to, and of course because it's Unity it doesn't actually set it where I want it to be. Yeah. So it's there. Now, I've got a big bug here, and this is kind of something that a lot of people sort of come across. So now that we have this reflection probe, it's reflecting the skybox. And that was kind of on purpose for me to do, because most people don't know about this, but you have to go to the atrium, or go to the objects you want to be reflected, and you basically have to go in there, and you have to define this as reflection probe static. Change that. And then what will happen is this probe, which should then pick up. Should pick up everything. Should pick up everything. Okay, let's just set it to real time. So with this probe, what you can do is you can position them around in your game, and basically depending on your use case of reflections to your game, is how you want to use the probe. So currently what they do is they sit at locations and then basically reflect everything around it. And depending on your use is which one of these types you want. So you can either bake it in the editor, which is not going to bake. Because I'm not baking. Okay, whatever. So we can either bake it in the editor, and then what that's going to do is it's going to basically bake whatever's currently sitting there. But if you have anything running through your scene or changing, it's not really going to take that into account. It's just basically set baked data. That's really good for low-end mobile or like low-end PC because you're not constantly updating what it looks like. It's just doing like a snapshot in editor. And that would just basically take a snapshot of each of the 6 faces and then basically kind of like circle them into a big sphere. Our dev team found that that's actually one of the most expensive things you can do on runtime. So by default, everything's baked. So you don't want to blow up people's phones. Custom allows you to actually, you know it's gone green, allows you to actually take a QMap and interject it at a location. So if you want all your shadows to kind of be cell shaded or all your shadows to be red or whatever, you can bake a probe out, color it in, and then bring it back in. And I haven't actually done this before, but let's interject in. Does that work? I have a beach ball, so I think it works. So we can take that QMap of sunset and then interject in a sunset at that location, even though the skyboxes are blue around outside. So you can basically interject in sort of different QMaps. Real time is the interesting one. So real time basically allows you to bake everything on constantly over and over again every frame. Now by default, we don't set it to be every frame because what it's like our graphics team said that's the most expensive thing to do every frame on any device. Because what you do is you have to take a snapshot of each of the 6 faces, combine them together, then convolute them together, then apply it to everything that they influence, then next frame do exactly the same thing, then the next frame do exactly the same thing, and it's actually really expensive. So they basically said you can either have on-awake real time, so that means when the probe comes into play, it gets instantiated, it's positioned in the scene, like it's attached to an object and placed, that will just do it on awake once. You can do it every single frame. This is the dangerous one, where every single frame is going to constantly rebake, but I would not recommend doing that on any sort of low-end mobile device. Desktop's probably the best one. We don't limit people, but like we generally don't say do this every single frame on device. Or you could have one maybe. Or you could do it via scripting. So let's say you had an environment that doesn't change. You can bake it, and then you can kick off like it's like reflection probe.bake. And then let's say you have like a building fall down, and then at the end of it, then rebake like the real-time probe, or bake it as it's falling and kind of blend the probes together. So you can basically do it how you want. You can basically bake like all the faces at once, individual faces. Yeah, it's kind of up to you. So I'm just going to do it on a wait because I want to be good and efficient. So now that we've got this in our scene, you can kind of see sort of like that it's reflecting all the elements around it within this box. So I showed this box to someone, they said, great, every game's going to be Minecraft now, we're just going to put all these boxes everywhere. And what this box doesn't do that. This box just basically, everything inside this box uses this probe. So like, for example, in this room, we could have like a probe in this room, and then a probe in that room, and then a probe in that room, and then basically it's just going to reflect everything inside that area. So I can go to this little handle, and then I can basically like pull out this reflection. So let's pull it out a little bit. About there. Let's pull it out that way, like that. Let's pull it that way, and let's pull it that way as well. Yeah, like so. And let's put it out to the roof as well, because the roof is pretty cool. Like that, and let's put it out to the floor. Oh, sorry, at the floor. So we now have basically a probe taking up this whole room. Now that the probe's taken up the whole room, what we now need to do is basically show that it's reflecting the skylight, and sort of show that it's actually reflecting things. So if I go to my light at the top here, or this big ceiling, if you remember, going back to the standard shader, we have an emission on this. So what the emission now does is I can actually light the whole environment using this texture emission, which is actually really, really cheap. So if I go to my point light in my environment and turn it off, so my scene has no lighting whatsoever. I've got my character, but he's kind of still being lit by the skybox for some reason. Oh well. If I then go to this big texture on the roof, someone give me a colour. Blue. Okay. So what I can actually do now is I can actually, if I turn on a radiance, you can see it a bit better. So you can actually see kind of areas that are blue around here, and then if I ramp this up, So from this texture, you can see like the blue is coming down and the blue is bouncing around inside here. If I go into like shaded mode, you can actually see like everything has got this nice blue tone. You can see that the reflection probe is actually reflecting the ceiling at an incredibly low resolution. And yeah, so everything in this environment has now got that blue hue. And that's really, really cheap because you don't have like real-time lighting. You're basically using textures. So some people have do really cheap lighting on their devices. They just have like a bunch of like textures that are high emission, like as floodlights, and then just don't render them on camera. So they have like these big floodlights kind of facing into the scene and stuff to get around, you know, like having their game, you know, run on their own devices and things. So I've had this whole blue. We can combine these together. So if I turn on my point light, we have my point light in the middle of the environment. I can drop that down a little bit more and shrink it a little bit, and then increase the intensity a little bit. So you can see kind of like on this character, we've got like the blue sort of like top around the rim overhead, but then we've got sort of yellow bits around the bottom. And now that we have sort of that blue skylight, you can kind of see the reflection in the roof. However, this is incredibly low res, so I can actually now go into my probe and basically say, bake it something else. So I've never actually successfully baked a 2K probe, I think. So if I set it to be 512, it doesn't do it. Oh, cool. Yeah, so now you can see the roof being reflected in the floor, and then I think we can go up to a helmet and you can see it. Yeah, not really. Helmet's not high res enough. You can see that on the floor, sort of being reflected on the roof. Now, there's two sort of ways of going about the reflections. You either have box projection or spherical. So if you want everything in the room to basically have the same reflection no matter where it is, you can set it all to be box reflection. And that's basically going to mean like wherever I go into the environment, it looks quite accurate. So I've got my reflection up there, and I've got reflection up there. Now that basically says if you have like a box room, so I guess this is kind of, well, it's not really a box, it's more like a rectangle, a squash rectangle, with a big garage door in the middle, as you do. So, for example here, this room would be perfect for box projection, whereas if you have kind of a round room or sort of rounding objects, spherical is probably better, but I'm going to go with box projection, because why not? Now, a really neat trick is, you can see here that with this sort of compass, everything's kind of faded around here, whereas inside here, everything's kind of smooth. So that's partly dependent on, you know, the smoothness slider basically on these objects. And that's kind of tricky to switch between the objects and kind of see the smoothness. So what our teams decided to do is they allowed you to view either just all the textures of everything with no lighting whatsoever, so kind of like that Albedo one, just the specularness, so basically all the specular sort of highlights and sort of, this character's got like a gold headrest around here, so it's going to have a gold reflective. The smoothness as well, so you can see the floor is kind of white, the character's white, and you can see sort of like the smooth areas. And you can either view, I've got this on the normal maps as well, so you can see how the normal maps look. I really want to make a game of this style, but I'll probably have to write some post-processing effects. And we can toggle it back. So yeah, we can have this environment. Okay, what else should I do? So with reflection probes, what you could probably notice is you can see with this reflection of the door here, is popping here. Now the reflection probes aren't really like a replacement for like screen space reflections. We are working on that, but they're currently like a method that you can use. So you can go wild reflection rates. You can have 30 reflection probes in a room, or you can just have one. It's sort of up to you. And we are working on screen space reflections, which you can turn on, everything looks like really nice and pretty. But one thing that a lot of people sort of ask for is overlapping reflection probes. So let's say you have a character in like a blue room and a character in a red room, or let's say like this garage room is red and then that one's like pink because everyone here likes the colour pink for some reason. We can place the probes, and then if our character walks from one to another, obviously it's going to pop between the colours straight away. Where you can actually now, you can take the bounding boxes, so let's take this probe, move it down towards the ground so you can see it's more reflected. You can see the bounding box is kind of like cutting off like their head-ish. What you can actually do is you can actually duplicate the reflection probes, like so, and actually intersect them into the two areas. So if I now select both reflection probes, you can kind of see, like on a side-on perspective, you've got the top probe for the top bit and the bottom probe for the bottom bit. So you can overlap them, and basically these will blend between these two different probes. So you can kind of see like it's reflecting sort of all the bit up there, it's reflecting sort of around around down here, like so. Beautiful. Right. You got that. Cool. So, what else should I show you? Okay. So, and obviously we have that here. So we can put an inflection probe in this corridor, another corridor, another corridor. So this whole scene, when you get it from the asset store, it's all set up with like lots of different lights. So I currently just have one light and some crazy blue lighting from the ceiling and some crazy sort of like bounces. But in the scene that they've sort of provided, they've got like separate lights for all these candles, and they're all animated in flicker. It's a much more complex and bigger scene. I'm kind of just throwing that in. So another thing that we've been working on is getting people to grips with Unity, which is actually quite a tricky thing, because Unity's so big now. There's about 5,000 different features in there. People kind of get a bit lost. So what we've actually been working on is underneath assets import package. We've got a whole bunch of sort of like a whole bundle of all sorts of different things to get you to grips with prototyping. So everyone here's already used Unity, so you're probably already familiar with this stuff. Boy? Yeah? Boy? How'd you say yes in Finnish? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, cool. So what we have here is we have a whole bunch of sort of built-in things like vehicles. So if I need a car, I can drop in a car and drive it around this environment. If I need a character to run around, I can just import the character. And these come with every single build of Unity, so you can just import it, drop in the character and have them running around. It should look pretty cool. When it does it. How much time do I have left? Like 1 minute minus 5 minutes?
7 minutes?
7 minutes. Okay.
No, more than that. 27.
20, exactly 27 minutes. Okay. So I've just imported the character. So we have in here, we have a rollable. So you can just like have a ball dropped in there and you can roll it around the scene. Third person, first person, if you want to make a first person shooter, just drop it in. So I'm just going to take my third person. We have AI which just walk around randomly, or I can just drop in like a third person. And here we have a character called Ethan. So yeah, so this character is normally called Evan, this one's called Ethan. So for some reason we call our characters E. It's a Danish company, so yeah. So now that I have Evan here, Ethan, sorry, I can basically like sit the camera in this top corner. So, okay, so you're all Unity professionals, so here's a neat little trick. So you've probably done it where you have the camera elsewhere and you're trying to realign it, you've got to like move it and like rotate it, and it's like really awkward to do. A neat little trick is to take your scene view to somewhere that looks pretty good. So let's say like this bird's eye view with all the nice reflections and things like that. Select your camera, which is elsewhere, and if you go to Game Objects, align with View, it will take your camera and put it at the exact location of where your scene view is. So I can just go Align with View, and then now my game view will just be exactly the same one. Like it depends on your perspective and sort of field of view and things. You can do this animation, so if you need the camera to be at A and B, you can like add in a keyframe of it being there, have it there, and it will have a nice tween going between them. That's kind of like a little trick. So now if I play my game, by game I mean I have this character running around and jumping. He can run through Mika currently, and he can also like run out the door. But we have him running around this environment. So now that we have this, how many, out of interest, how many people use Mechanim or like this sort of character state machine? Okay. So with Mechanim, we've done some extra upgrades. So currently with Mechanim, you can add like states, and you can say transition from state A to state B when you jump, or state B to state C when you sort of get hit and things like that. You can use it for both third-person characters, also UI panels sliding in and out, dialogue trees. I've seen it used to animate ants. So someone made like an ants real-time strategy game, so they had like all sorts of different ants terminology in there. You can use it for sort of any sort of like animation or motion or flow. And with Mechanim, you can do all sorts of really cool new bits and pieces. So with this state machine where you have transitions and things, when you push space, you go and do the jump animation, you can actually create this all via script on runtime. So you can actually write a script that creates this whole state machine procedurally. So if you're making any procedural content games, you don't have to use the same blueprint. You can just kind of like, via scripts, regenerate everything on runtime. So people have been making like, I want every enemy in my game to be completely different, or I want every AI in my game to have a different behavior. like just generating all these scripts on runtime from this like creator. It's actually really cool.
So that's a new feature.
Yes, yeah, it's like a runtime API creation or something like that. Something like that. Another really cool thing is you can now add scripts directly onto states. So beforehand, you'd have to have a script on like your character, and you have to say, "Am I jumping? Am I jumping? Am I jumping? Yes, go do this." So what I can now do is, if I wanted to, what should I do? Let's slow down time whenever he jumps. I can actually select airborne. I can actually go to add behavior, and let's call this new script matrix. Okay, so we have matrix behavior on that. If I open that up, we now have state machine behaviors, which basically allow you to detect on entry and exit, and basically do anything that you'd normally do with like a mono behavior. So if I can expose values, use speed. Oops, sorry. Before someone has a heart attack. So let's say like on entry of the state, I can do like let's do something naughty. Get component. Oh no, hang on, I've already got the animator in my parameter. So animator.speed equals new speed. So that's on entry of the state. So you can do all sorts of things. You can reference like on kick, I turn on a particle renderer or something like that. Or on like slide, I have like turn on wind and things like that. So it's a nicer workflow. You can already do that in Unity 4, but this is kind of a newer thing. So, and let's say on exit, so when we leave the state, we can then go in and be like, because we already have the animator parameter there, or being put in, speed equals 1. Okay, simplest thing you can possibly do. So let's go back in. Let's go back to the animator, select airborne, and someone give me a new speed that will be, not 0 or 1.
0.3.
Okay. Everyone normally says 20, so then he's like super fast. So what should happen is I now have him. And he doesn't do it. Okay, this is, yeah. Okay, it doesn't do it. Why? I'll find out later on. But yeah, you can kind of see there whether you can add in these different states. You could have like color, so if you want something to fade to a different color on runtime. Basically, sort of anything that you normally have on entry and exits. You now no longer have to check every frame if you're in a particular animation and things like that. So color, pick, because everyone loves pink. Cool. There's a couple of other things we've been working on. So I have 4 minutes now, right?
21.
21. So we now have a couple of other things. So we've been working on optimization of physics. This is kind of not like a sexy front-end sort of visual drop in the probe and has reflections thing. This is more like on a runtime thing. So I have a crazy script that spawns thousands and thousands of cubes in this room. So we've got here like a point light. I'm just going to add in spawner. Item to spawn is like a little crate. So if I go to my crate and drop it in the scene, it's just a simple crate. It's got all the PBR textures, collider, everything. And now on runtime, I can then like push around the crate, and the crate goes through the door, of course. What I can actually do now is on my point light, I can say, go to like add my crate, spawn. How many every second, every frame? How many should I spawn? Wait, 3. So that works. So now I can spawn like hundreds and hundreds. And you can see like all of them are still running around. My character can still jump and run. The one almost went out the door. I can add tons and tons and tons, and the frame rate's not actually dropping at all. Like, my character's in there somewhere. Another crates are settling because the friction to be really low. So you can basically, with the physics, it's now like you can now have hundreds of objects just spawning. I have no idea how many there are. There's probably thousands. And it all looks really cool. So you can have our physics. We've basically wrapped it really up with the 3D physics. So you can have lots of like objects bouncing around, having really nice things happening. Now the last feature I'm sort of going to show is frame debugger, and of course it crashes. Unity. So the frame debugger, if it keeps crashing, I'll sort of show something else. So the frame debugger's the thing. I showed it in Sweden in a meeting, and this guy actually started crying. So not because it crashed. because it looks so beautiful. So what the frame debugger does is it basically gets around this really annoying like stats panel. So you know you go to the game view, you have okay, so you go to the game view, and if you go to like stats, okay, so currently the scene isn't as optimized, so it's like that number, and you're like, well, how many of them are like lighting, how many of them are shadows, how many of them are bloom, how many of them are characters, how many of them are artists just being lazy, how many of them are UI, and that's kind of really annoying. So, please. Ah, no, okay. Whatever. I'll show you some GIFs. So Aris, who's like I think his job title is graphics plumber. So he basically got annoyed with like this, like just this number. So what the frame debugger does is it actually, if I zoom in here, it actually splits up every single object in the scene. It shows you the exact rendering order, every single draw call, what's being rendered on that frame, which order it's in, which group it's going into in graphics. You can basically go through and sort of piece together and sort of understand exactly what's being drawn. So you can see here, like, you're drawing the GL, that processing effect, which I think is blue. You can see all sorts of different target displays. You can see different colors. You can see things like before they've rendered the skybox. It basically has this epic, like, really long list of everything that you need to draw that is being rendered in your game. So it's really useful. Like, I went to visit one company and they said our game runs really slowly, and they had like 1,000 draw calls, and they were targeting iPhone 4, which is very brave. So basically, I said to them, I turned on their frame debugger, and I think like 980 of their draw calls were their UI. So because they made their own custom UI. So basically, I turned it on, and they turned it off, and their game ran like a dream. And they were like, okay, we need to redo some stuff. Yeah. So let's see if I can do it. I'll do it one more time, and then hopefully it won't.
So it also works with Unity UI.
Yes, so anything that's being drawn, it will basically work for that. If this doesn't work this time, I'll show it in a different project. For some reason, yeah, the cubes were too awesome. Okay, one more time. Wait, okay, it worked. Right. No one say anything or do anything. Okay, so if I close down everything, so I have more like space on my screen to show you, because this looks really cool. So now that I have my frame debugger, I can then click run. Enable it, and it now has a list of every single draw call in my entire scene, all the way down to the bottom. They're all in groups, so if I now like close my camera renderer, you can see there's that many draw calls going to my camera renderer, that many is being drawn, that many is an image effect, that many are opaque, that many, like one draw call for the skybox, so I know it's not being expensive there. What do I have? So lighting is 779 because everything's like real time and stuff. And everything's got, even those little plants have like individual shadows, so I can go in and I can actually like go through and scroll through here. I can actually see these different bits and pieces. I can actually have like a pretty cool little slider which actually goes through all the objects and sort of shows it building up the scene. So you can see here, like I can actually see. So let's say, for example, between like here and here. Like, I could probably do some serious kind of like batching in here and combining lots of materials. So this seems really good to show like, oh look, so that whole area with all the plants is like just all a bunch of objects. I can actually have this as like material. And all those, look at that, all those individual, that's just, it shows then all sort of like all the lighting, all the shadows being drawn and worked out. And right at the very end, image effects, which is always the one thing I hate using. Because they can be really expensive, you can actually see like at the end I just look once and that's fine. So yeah, so the frame debugger makes people cry. Some guy was like, this is all I ever wanted in life. My wife is no more. And then if I like spawn loads of objects, you can actually do it on runtime. So if I pull up my inspector, down here, and then I select, oh okay, I've lost like everything. Actually, it's the lights. Let's spawn like this object. Okay. Whoa. Okay, that's a bug. That looks pretty cool though. Yeah. So yeah, we kind of have those assets. We kind of have a bit of everything. So hopefully that was like a useful workflow. Like this scene, the scene on the asset store is significantly sort of more complex than what I put together. They've got lots of lights, lots of image effects. They've got some scripts in there. So if you just go to the asset store. Go to Unity Essentials on the side and open that up. It's not there, of course. Public, yep, so we have this whole scene. So, for example, I just have like the blue light in the top, you can kind of see that, and then I have a light at the bottom, because they've got loads of spotlights on different flags and different environments. They have this whole sort of scene sort of lit up to their perspective and things like that, because they had more time to drop in 500 lights. I'm sure if I sat here and dropped in 500 lights, everyone would just leave. So, yeah. They even have characters that walk around from their game, and whole state machines and things like that. So that's like a full sort of project factor, and it's not the full game, because then you'll have 1,000 Republic clones on the Asset Store, on iOS Store, and I'm sure they don't want that at all. So yeah, it's like 3 or 4 levels. So I've got like 18 minutes left, I guess.
3.
3 minutes left.
No, more than that. But, you know,
Enough. Let's say
Enough.
that, right?
enough.
Enough minutes, okay.
Enough.
So I'll show some audio. So in Unity 4, audio was kind of play, pause, and stop, and that was the incredibly sort of advanced audio we had. In Unity 5, we've completely overhauled it. So we now have a new audio mixer, which allows you to channel separate groups and separate sort of sounds into this mixing panel, which a lot of audio people like. And you can also do a lot via code. So if I go to my audio mixer here, we've got here all the audio from our game, which is pretty cool. So I've got a really simple game where I have a boy who shoots a gun and he kills teddy bears. So I showed this, and then like this 17-year-old girl sitting and talks like crying because they're really cute. And we need to make plushies of these, but I'm trying to win over buttons. But you can see that as I'm doing various things, so I have the music channel playing. Oh, whenever I get hit, it distorts the audio. When I die, it goes back and resets sort of the audio. So what you'll notice is I have lots of different effects. I have ducking, so whenever I shoot, you can notice that the background music actually dips underneath it. Because if I didn't have that, everything would kind of be on the same level. So I've now got some nice ducking. I can add in all sorts of effects. So if I go to my, let's say, my sound effects column, you can see I'm channeling in gunshots, player, and enemies. You can basically have all these audio sort of players channeling in. So I have my gunshots, whenever I play takes damage, when my enemies take damage. Basically, you can channel all these things in and sort of tone them up and down. Now, a really cool thing, if I turn off enemies so they don't keep killing me, another really cool thing is you can actually add these effects and add and customize these on runtime. So if I then go into the editor, I have, going against all traditional Unity laws, I now have an edit and play mode button. Only for audio currently though. Going against traditional Unity workflow, we have an edit and play mode button. So what that allows me to do is it allows me to go to different sort of areas and change a lot of values. So I can change down music. Yeah, play around with them. So let's do something. Let's go to sound effects and let's add an effect. So let's add one of these. Let's go crazy. Oh no, that's too crazy. Let's add a low pass. So now. Okay, that sounds fine. So when I leave play mode, it's basically now got the low pass filter. And because it's on sound effects, every sound effect played in the game, or everything going through the sound effects sort of mixer, is going into this mix. So whereas in Unity 4 you had to say this has echo, 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 this has echo. You now just say sound effects have echo, and then everything has an echo. So let's add a low pass and let's add an echo as well, and I have no idea what's going to happen. Okay, let's actually turn that. Okay, let's have some enemies for him so I can actually do what Oh, this is a really cool bug. It still plays in the background. I haven't recorded that bug, so I really like it. So as well as having sort of all the audio mixing, attaching effects and channeling them onto another, you can actually expose variables to scripts really easily. So rather than writing something really complex and horrible, so let's go to my health, let's go to my player, and in my player health I've got my master mixer. Now rather than doing something like, rather than doing something really new like get component audio, obviously never use get component in update, but whatever. Get component audio mixer dot main mix dot I don't know sfx dot echo dot pitch dot, and then basically having this really sort of long, convoluted, really horrible mess of get components and sort of really complex structure. You can actually just expose them by a script. So for example, I've got here on my pitch shifter, so every time I take damage it gets more distorted. I can just click right click. Okay, that's already exposed. Let's say I want to right click expose pitch. I now have my pitch, and then I can just basically write in there like pitch. And then if I want to reference that by scripts, or for example, whenever my player gets hurt, I've got player hurt. I can then just do something simple like go to my main mixer, set the float of player hurt, and then I just use it, just get the health slider and have a weakness multiplier. So basically, as I get hurt, I'm just changing that value. One more thing with audio is snapshots. So let's say you have this room and that room, and there's a jukebox in this room, there's a jukebox in that room, and that room's a cave, and this room's like a swimming pool, a sauna. I mean, obviously those are going to have different types of echoes and different types of distortion. Now, I wouldn't suggest you go through and you expose 4 completely different parameters via script, and then you've got like, let's say via code, like 20 different parameters that you've all got to change on runtime. So what you can now do is you can now set up snapshots, which are basically like, they're kind of like presets of different sort of sliders and data and things. So I can have one for a sauna and set up all the echoes and distortion for a sauna. I could set one up for reindeer forest. I can set one up for Kayani. Ulu. So then I can set up all these snapshots with all these different effects for these different locations, and then fade them from one to another. So let's say I walk into an environment and basically it will fade from sauna to reindeer forest, and I have all these values all instantly changing. Now, I've never been to Oli, I've been to Kayani, but I can't remember what it sounds like, so I have some preset ones. So I've got unpaused, which basically has the music of these particular values. Now, if you look at paused, things change. So as soon as I click paused, you see the cutoff frequency has dropped and the volume's dropped. So there's different values, and you can notice that in the game as well. So and you can see like, okay, so you can see here like with pause and paused. Yeah, so you can basically toggle between these different snapshots or like fade them in. You can use them for like different states. You can use lots of really cool stuff. So audio mixing no longer sucks, so that's pretty cool. Well, it now exists, so that's pretty cool. It didn't exist before.
Since we were talking about crying before, this made all of my audio guys very like crying.
Oh, okay. So grown men crying should be our new like mission statement, right?
Yes.
Unity, making grown men cry. Yeah. Okay. I'll put that to marketing. How much time do I have left?
5 minutes.
Cool. I will show you. So here's just 2D bits and pieces. Well, that makes 2D games. I know you do. Okay, some people. So I'll show you these anyway because they're fun. I can do them in 5 minutes. So 2D is quite difficult to actually like upgrade, sort of like all the new 2D bits and pieces. So we integrated new sort of physics areas. So not that demo. That's a better demo. So I've got here an environment with like a whole bunch of coins at this point. Now these coins all go into these different areas. And the tricky thing is to say everything within a zone or an area get pushed. So let's say, like Mario Kart, you drop a banana. You want everything in that banana zone to like spin out. Or let's say you want like some wind and leaves, then get pushed with the wind. to do that via physics is kind of annoying. So what we have is inside this area, we now have an area effector. We can actually say which direction it's going in, the magnitude, the force, the drag, and basically push them in different directions, like so. So now if I run this, basically this coin's going to, with no code at all, accessing the rigid bodies, it's basically going to say when it goes into an area, get pushed in a particular direction. So you can use wind, oil. I saw like a karting game has like oil slick, and then you skid out the oil slick as it pushes in the direction. It uses whatever shape the collider is, so you can have any shape, a starfish, I don't know, a reindeer, a tree, whatever it may be. So that's kind of like a whole block area. Another one that we have is this one. Okay, no, don't set that to be 7,000. So what we have here is we have a series of kind of asteroids. And each of them have like a point which basically attracts to a certain location. So you can see like when the asteroids come in, they get pulled around to that point. So they've got like a negative point effector because it's all coming to a location. Now one thing I like to do is muck around with this. So if I go to the gravity effector and everything's a -10 force, someone give me a different minus number. Anyone know any numbers? Your programs?
-42.
Okay, minus 420. 4,200. 420 would be a bit weird. So everything in the top right one is now going to get pulled with. Yeah, the little particles don't get affected, but you can see that as everything's coming in, it's all getting pulled in really fast. And much like that, if I select the gravity effector, instead of just a minus, I can actually do a plus. And what it's going to do is it's going to like, well, I'll show you what it does. So now everything, when it comes to that, it just sends it away. So you can basically have constant forces either attracting or repelling to a location. And another demo that we have is we have Flappy Bird, as everyone does. And this is my feelings of Flappy Bird. So on our bombs, we basically have effectors, and we have a particular power. So that's supposed to be 500. So rather than it being a constant force, this is now basically a like a one-shot force. So as we drop this in here, yeah, and then we can like do stuff like this. That's actually using the audio mixer stuff. So the audio mixer, you can only use it for 3D, you can use it for 2D, so you can have audio coming in from 2D sources. And that actually just plays a standard explosion, but with like an echo going in the background. And kind of, I guess, a low-pass filter as well. And a really fun thing to do is, rather than having pushing it away, is like pulling it into a location, you can make a black hole. So, like... Okay, that doesn't really work. Yeah. So you can basically attract or repel like kind of one-shots and things like that. One thing I forgot to show you is this like magnet. So I can basically use this magnet to like push with no code. So there's no the only code I have is to like switch between attracting and repelling. So I now have like a fun game to like get all the coins out of the box. If this is the next big Finland hit, because I know what happens in Finland, you have these huge hits that happen and then things. I'll take my card. No, I'm joking. So you can basically attract and repel from this point. So this is just like just wherever the magnet is. They're all kind of hits here. So yeah, that's kind of the new 2D stuff. So I probably have like 1 minute left. Is that right?
0.
0 minutes left. Okay, I'll go very quick. As well as on top of that, we have a brand new UI system, which allows you to do sort of 2D, 3D, all sorts of bits and pieces.
There's a good video about that in Unity Finland group. Tuomas made a presentation about it as well.
Who did? Oh, cool. Yeah, it's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
Oh, unless your talk was really bad. So, like, in terms of the new features of 5.0, we've got like physically based rendering, where you basically can plug in the different textures and have emission and have beautiful like textures out of the box. Reflection probes, you can place them at points. New ambient lighting, so that's like using the skybox for everything. Global illumination, so like everything bouncing off the different surfaces. Mix the audio in. Frame debugger, which makes people cry, which is really cool. The state machine behaviors, where you have a script, and it didn't really work, but like I'll have to play around with that, and I'll show you guys later. You can now do root motion authoring, so like if you have a character that walks, you can then set that off to keep walking in a point, or you don't have to have like a child, like a parent holding an object to make it move at that point. You can now have it whenever. 2D physics, UI system with 3 exclamation marks for 3 iterations. That's in 4.6 and in 5. And you can add like the 2D colliders, and you can add the PBR shader onto the UI if you want to, and it's pretty cool. We have a new plugin inspector, so you can select any plugin, and you can basically choose which platforms it includes it on the build. So that way you don't have to bloat your app with like loads of Android stuff on like iOS, or you don't have to bloat your app with loads of BlackBerry stuff when you target iOS, but no one targets BlackBerry. And we have thousands of other updates. I think we have a 57-page document with all the other updates, with removed make MMO button, and people actually saw that, so that was pretty cool. And we have GIFs as well. We've also got optimizations, so we basically optimized a lot of the backend of Unity and like iOS Metal, 64-bit, like Intel x86, 64-bit editor, IL2CPP, which is the new technology we're making, where it takes everything from Unity and compiles it to C++ and then goes onto your platform. Actually, for WebGL, it goes through 4 code conversions from Unity to C++ to Emscripten to JavaScript. So that was an entertaining.
Can you even add one step from C# to IL to?
Actually, there's kind of 5 steps, I guess. So yeah, that's a new technology we're rolling out to sort of have faster scripting, sort of like scripting calls and scripting methods, and like a faster backend than Mono. For like currently iOS and WebGL, but our goal is for like all the platforms. So yeah, faster scripting and stuff. We now have also like Alex said, it's a personal edition, so it's free to build to all these platforms. I took off BlackBerry because there's like 2 people in the world that built to it. So we've got Xbox One, PS4, and Wii U if you're registered developers in those programs. WebGL's free. We have all those options. In development, new 3DS. I think I'm on camera, so someone will probably say no, it isn't. I think we're the only middleware outside of Nintendo's internal tech that supports the new 3DS, which is pretty cool. We're working on that, and a lot of people were very interested in that, so that's pretty awesome. We have the new services as well. I didn't have time to go into it because I've got some other things, so maybe I can come back and talk about it some other time in the future. So we have Cloud Build, which is basically picks up your like any commits you make or any pushes you make. It'll kick off a build in the clouds. It'll send an email to all your collaborators so they can remotely install it. So if I need to test a game on Android, rather than my 3 Android devices I have, I could just post a link on Twitter and have everyone on Twitter download my game and test it for me. So it's basically a replacement for, not a replacement, but like an alternative to TestFlight, which is now iTunes. So I feel sorry for everyone having to use iTunes. We now have analytics as well, and that works across all our platforms. So if you write a custom event, this player blew up Flappy Bird on this device, at this point, it tracks it across every platform that, well, I'd say like 90% of the platforms we support. It'll say platform, location, if it crashed and things like that. Basically analytics out of the box. Video ads. A lot of people don't like video ads, but like the guys across the road do because they make 3 million from it. And those are optional ads, so you can have ads made by Amplify, who are actually in Helsinki. And basically, you can show an ad like optionally and say if you watch this video ad, you can then your character now have a pink hat if you want to, or he's now called Mika and you now have a sauna level and basically unlock sort of content through watching video ads. And we also have every play as well, so you can like record gameplay. So if my mum's playing the horror game I've made, I can record her playing the horror game, and then she jumps and then she can upload it to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to have people sort of doing their content. So it's kind of all the other stuff at the end. And we're working on some other bits and pieces as well. And in 5.1, so that was just 5.0, where we kind of went crazy and updated audio, visuals, and basically everything. And we're updating more stuff. So we have a brand new networking system. That's sort of both high level and low level. So high level, you can set up lobbies, matchmaking, peer-to-peer, peer-to-server, do all sorts of really cool networking with very, very little code. Or you have like the low end side of things where you can really go deep.
Did you fix the nut punching already?
Pardon?
Did you fix the nut punching?
Nut punching.
Nut punching. N-A-T punching.
Oh, I think it's nuts. Okay.
Is it even possible on mobile?
Yes, it is.
Nowadays?
Well, it is possible to do nut punching, but you have to do it through UDP. It's a bit trickier. Let's say that I have worked for a company that kind of done it. But yeah,
Kind of nut punches.
I regret it.
Integrated VR, so we partnered with Oculus to actually put like the VR plugin in Unity. SketchUp file importer, so if you're doing any architecture stuff. HDR color picker, so you can actually like pick like the color based on brightness and things like that. Texture compression called Crunched. And basically, if you're talking to a DXT platform, so this is more for like WebGL and Android, iOS and things. It lets you take the texture and crunches it, so you have like a smaller sort of like texture in like on disk, and then when you get into your game, it then unloads it into memory. So smaller loading times and bug fixes and optimizations. We actually release 2 builds of Unity every week. Go for it.
Before you switch this line, still from the networking, yeah. What does it use as a backend, like server backends?
Our own bits and pieces.
So you will have server component,
You should do, yes.
which you will run in what cloud?
Like, what's the backend? Do I use another Unity client as the server?
You can do. I don't know too much about it, by the way.
That's how it is in the previous implementation. Like you had a master server just to get all the clients to connect to each other,
Oh, okay.
and then it was just completely peer-to-peer. And with
Sort
a
of
master
both.
client.
You can both do it that way, or you can also do it like locally. There's a whole. So basically, our old networking system was made by somebody who didn't know networking. I think. Sorry. To the
Yeah, at that point, just go to that.
Whereas we actually hired a team who are like worked at Blizzard and like Riot Games and wargaming and stuff. And they've actually just redone this from the ground up with every type of network imaginable in mind. So you should do. I'll probably come back to Finland and then talk about it then.
Will both of them be available, or will one replace the other?
Both should be available, I think. I think we have about 5 blog posts about it. So yeah, should be.
I have 2 questions, kind of like regarding upcoming features. Like there was like about a year ago, or might have been even longer than that. Like there was some talk about that you are entirely like redoing the Terra system for Unity. Do you not have any information about that?
Yeah,
or-
we're redoing that. We haven't sort of. Yeah, we're working on that. What we tend to do is we got kind of burnt with the UI system. We showed it way too early, and then we had to redo it a couple of times, I think. And so what we want to do now is, rather than announce things and show them off like a long time in advance, and we like to bake them a bit more, kind of like Valve, where they bake all their projects for a while, and then sort of start to talk about it, show off when it's kind of like 80%-ish done. That way we don't like get people like really hyped up for something that has a moving like target for when it actually comes out. We don't show off when this isn't what it'll actually look like when it comes out, because lots of things change, and other various things pop up or something like that. So we are working on the terrain system. I don't have anything to show, unfortunately, but like we do have people, like a team, working on it. And when it's more showable, when it's not just programmer code, and it's actually like has an interface and looks pretty, we'll show it off.
Yeah, can you like give any kind of estimate, like when you might show it on like a year or 5 years? Or...
Hopefully within 5 years. I don't know. Like when I can show it off, I'll probably come back to it and show it off. But yeah, they're working on we have people working on it, and
Another thing is, do you have any information about the multi-scene support?
We actually put out like an expert Unity multi-scene. Here we go. Here's a plug from last year. So basically, this guy called Steen, who's like one of our like core programmers, he basically talks about like in the 5.x release cycle, so not 5.0, not 5.1, but at some point, we have multi-scene editing. So you can have scenes within scenes and things, and he puts out video. And this feature is not shipping 5.0, but working on a later release. So he actually talks about that a bit, and then basically goes into more in depth and sort of chat. So you know our CTO going in and sort of answering those people's technical questions. So they put out that experimental build to see what people thought and how it would be. And in the video, they have you have a scene, you drag and drop it inside another scene, and you can have scenes within scenes, and have various scenes doing lots of things. And again, they're still working on that. They need to, when it becomes more baked, then they sort of will show it off. I'm sorry. We don't want to let people down, like, with anything. We also want to do it right, so we tend to show it off when it's like we're going to release it. Partly because if we release it and it's we've got to redo the whole system again. It looks embarrassing. So yeah, multi-scene. And hang on, I'll finish because I'm way over time. I apologize. Yeah, I'm sorry. So yeah, that's kind of our goal. So like, help you to create some games, deploy to like 1 billion platforms, even the new 3DS, which is pretty cool, and then connect with everyone with all like other stuff, and then be successful. So rather than doing questions, just come find me in the sauna or with a beer or something like that, and just say hi. And if you have any questions about when's Nested Prefabs coming out, and what else pops up? When's Unity going to have a Zoom slider for Mechanim? You know, those sorts of questions. Just come up and ask them, or just anything else. Or if you have any badass games, come and show them. Perhaps not in the sauna, because devices will probably get wet and break, and I don't want to be held reliable. But yeah, just come say hi, and thank you.